Here on the Colour of Country Life, we're speaking again with Mark Latham, one of the Upper House MPs for One Nation in New South Wales. Mark, how are you going today?
Pretty good, Ricky. Good to speak to you, and I hope you and all the listeners have a great Christmas and New Year. We deserve it.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a heck of a year. We've had a federal election as well as an election coming up for your party, at least in March. I don't believe you're up for re-election, is that right?
Well, I've decided that the 8-year term is way too long in the upper house. Democracy's got to be about accountability, and you can lose sight of upper house members after 5 or 6 years. The 8-year term is way too long. So I'm taking the, I suppose, unorthodox, but I think democratic practice of resigning my spot so I can recontest and seek a renewed mandate that One Nation has been doing for the policy work in the upper house, our work on schools, health, water policy, infrastructure, anti-woke, reforming the public sector, getting rid of government debt and deficit. So, yeah, all those things are important, and I want to head the ticket as the party leader, so that's what I'm doing.
So you've got your other MLC is Ron Roberts, I believe. If you're successful there, then you and him would face alternate elections if you don't get any other candidates elected. Is that right?
That's right, because 8 years ago, One Nation didn't contest the New South Wales elections. We're newbies, if you like, over the last 4 years. We've done a power of work, and we want to seek the judgment of the New South Wales people, for myself in particular as party leader, to see if they've supported that, and hopefully they will support it, and we'll have some good enhanced numbers in the upper house, and hopefully the balance of power, particularly with Labor, looks like they'll come in. I think they need a handbrake. People need an insurance policy against Labor getting control of both houses of Parliament, and I think One Nation is the best bet for that.
Now, we'll look at the Labor Party under Chris Minns and others in New South Wales in a moment, but in the landscape, I guess the territory you're seeking to occupy, you'd be encouraged by results recently in the South Australian election in March and the Victorian one, and results announced this week where you've now got MLCs in those two upper houses as well.
Yeah, that's right. We've got representatives in 4 of the 6 upper houses around the Commonwealth, and we're hoping New South Wales will have the strongest representation. We could jump from 2 to 4 or even 5, which is a very healthy balance of power if the numbers fall that way. So I think the upper houses do an important job in a context where public faith and support for the major parties is in decline. The major parties haven't been doing a very good job in some of these key areas. Look at the skyrocketing electricity prices, the cost of living, broken promises. So going for a minor party that supports and fights hard according to the values that the voters might have, I think that's a good option. And then we do good work to block bad legislation and try and improve other bills that have got some potential but aren't quite in perfect shape. So a house of review and a balance of power and an insurance policy against the excessive policies you might get from a Labor Green government in New South Wales, I think that's very important.
Well, it does seem to me it looks like there's a bit of an opportunity for consolidation, if you like, in the right of centre votes. You'd take some encouragement as well from the disintegration of what's happening with the shooters, fishers and farmers as well?
Well, not necessarily. We've worked cooperatively with them in the upper house. I've got a lot of time for Robert Borzak, who's been the mainstay of their party. You know, I don't sort of dance on anyone's grave, really. I think it's sad that some of their lower house members have sort of shown a bit of political naivety in how to handle these things. You know, normally in politics, you get your people elected, then you work out who your leader is. But their lower house members have taken the unprecedented step of wanting to sort out the leader and then see if he can get elected by the people of New South Wales. So, yeah, they've got the cart ahead of the horse, and the shooters have done some good things in the past. I mean, they got 3 elected in the lower house, including in the seat of Murray at the last election. So, yeah, it's probably a sad moment, I think, in the diversity of New South Wales democracy.
Well, one of those changes, we'll look at the broader topics of the major parties in a moment, but also Fred Nile is finally departing the Parliament. And then the Christian Democrats, I don't know if they're contesting the election or not, but you've sought to appeal, at least on religious freedom grounds, amongst others, to voters that might have previously voted for the CDP.
Yeah, the Christian Democrats have fallen apart. They're not a registered party now, so they go out as Fred goes out after his 40 years of service in the upper house. But for a range of reasons, I've been very strong with the religious anti-discrimination bill that I've moved. We've got that in really good shape, and I'm hoping the major parties can see the sense in supporting it. New South Wales and South Australia are the only states without religious anti-discrimination provisions, and the fierce, bigoted rhetoric against Christians now in particular is a really surprising and unwelcome development in our public life. I've also done a lot of work with parental rights in schools, the worry of woke political content in classrooms to push back against that. A lot of people are very worried. They want their children to have the basics of education, the 3 R's and basic skills, instead of teachers pushing their own political agenda. So they're all very important issues where, I suppose, whether you call them conservatives, Christians, libertarians, they'd be inclined to think that I've been leading the charge in the New South Wales Parliament.
Well, when you talk about, you said earlier, potentially putting a brake on a theoretically incoming Chris Minns Labor government, there's been quite a lot of change in the last 18 months in the leadership of the Liberals, the Nationals and to the Labor Party. When people turn up to vote and think they're voting for an individual, they're really voting, I guess, for a party that in all 3 cases have had to change leader in recent times.
Yeah, they have, and you mentioned the shooters and the Christian Democrats falling away. The Greens lost their leader, David Shoebridge, who went to the Senate. I suppose, really, ironically, One Nation is the party of stability in New South Wales politics. That hasn't always been the case as you look around our party's history. But Rod Roberts and I worked really hard to be methodical, professional, united, provide a stable political party that's got good ideas and policies in accord with the people who support us. So, we think we've done good work over the 4 years. An election campaign, it's the icing on the cake. You don't change 50% of public opinion in an election campaign. What you do is say, look, we've worked hard, here's our achievements, what we've been doing, our record over the 4-year period, and here's our ideas going forward.
When you look at the landscape across the nation, and if Chris Minns is successful at the election, you're a former Labor leader yourself. It does appear Labor's on the up. Anthony Albanese, now the Prime Minister, they seem to be sweeping right-of-centre governments out of office across the country.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I suppose the teal factor weakens the Liberal Party, but the Liberal Party has also gone quite left-wing in a number of areas. Look at Matt Keane. Liberal ministers like Matt Keane, Speakman, Stokes, they would easily fit into a Greens party room discussion, particularly with their 100% support for renewable energy, their woke PC-type attitudes about what people can say and can't say, their support for this left-wing political content in schools. So, yeah, the Liberal Party and the National Party have changed along those lines. It's a very surprising development. So anyone who believes in traditional Australian values, might be a little bit conservatively inclined and likes stability, and would probably think, as I do, of course, that Australia had a great public policy set up in the 80s and 90s. Why did we ever change it? Why did we go down a very different path? And now we're paying the price with higher electricity prices, cost of living out of control, education standards and results declining. So, we're a party that I always say we're probably the equivalent these days in New South Wales of that 80s and 90s policy success on both sides of the fence, and we try and project that.
You mentioned energy policy there. One of the things that's happening in southern New South Wales across the Riverina into South Australia is this interconnector, which it looks to me more like it brings more benefit to the South Australians pushing wind into New South Wales to compete with coal rather than the other way round. What do you make of this? Well, they think they're calling it, the National Party federal leader David Littleproud called it platinum plating of the electricity network. Is that what we're seeing?
Well, it's a long extension cord. It does have some benefits for South Australia, but South Australia has got the dilemma if the renewables aren't generating the power during a wind drought or for other reasons. I mean, you had that bad storm years ago that knocked transmission wires down and the whole state was blacked out. So renewables are intermittent. They don't work when the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing. So you need backup power. You need energy security, 24/7. Baseload access, so New South Wales still has a little bit of that. So I suppose South Australia gets the benefit of the extension cord bringing that baseload power in from our remaining coal-fired power stations, but they're under siege. Matt Keane wants to close them all. And New South Wales one day will have the same problem as South Australia. What do we do? when the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing? How do we keep the lights on?
And just lastly, as we head to that state election in March next year, you mentioned you're running for the upper house, and when it comes to energy, the Labor opposition are calling for a recall of Parliament. They're leaving it pretty late, just like Albanese's got federal Parliament back today on Thursday the 15th of December. Do you support the call for Parliament to meet more often, or at least between now and the state election?
Oh, I think before Christmas, this is a Christmas stunt. Of course, the Parliament should sit if there's important legislation, but I'd need to look thoroughly at this Albanese proposal, which is said to have a lot of problems attached to it. You want to do something about electricity prices and energy security? Well, just go back to the recent fact that Australia once had the cheapest electricity in the world. And the people who said we need to rebuild the entire network and go 100% renewables and build these new transmission wires and create a whole new setup, which is very, very expensive, and now consumers are paying for it. Well, I don't trust them to be part of the solution because, quite frankly, they are the problem. They are the problem, and the best thing to do for the electricity grid is stop the transition, stop the big change, stop the expenses of rebuilding it, and fortify our coal-fired power stations, gas peaking plants, also have nuclear power, which would be beneficial in keeping the lights on, and renewables as part of a viable energy mix. I mean, the more energy supply you've got, the lower the prices will be.
Well, good point, Mark Latham, and we look forward to chatting with you in the lead up to March's state election. Thanks for joining us. Merry Christmas to you and all the team at One Nation.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. It's a pleasure, and very happy to talk next year as the election heats up.